Welcome to the deep dive. We have a really highly focused mission for you today.
We absolutely do.
If you are a professional in the construction or quantity surveying space and you're looking to seriously elevate the robustness of your practice,
Which, let's face it, you should be.
right, then you are in the exact right place. Because today we're looking at one specific, incredibly authoritative source, the RICS.
That's the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors for those newer to the acronym.
Exactly. The RICS Professional Guidance on Tendering Strategies, first edition. Our goal today is to equip you with the knowledge to achieve highly transparent, totally auditable tendering outcomes.
And that is just the perfect way to frame it, because the goal today is to cut through a lot of the general industry noise.
And the bad habits.
Oh, the bad habits that just form over time.
Yeah.
Right. We're providing a masterclass on tendering grounded entirely in this RICS standard. We'll be walking through the fundamental strategic decisions you have to make before a project even begins.
All the way to the math.
Right, the rigorous mathematical techniques you actually need to normalize those bids once they land on your desk.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond just, asking the market for a price.
It's about understanding the actual mechanics. Okay, let's unpack this, because I see a fundamental mistake constantly right at the very genesis of a project. Clients, and honestly even some seasoned professionals, will use the terms procurement and tendering as synonyms.
Yeah, they use them totally interchangeably.
Like they're the exact same thing. But if you look at the formal definitions in the RICS guidance, the distinction is massive. And if you blur those lines, you're already setting your project up for confusion.
Well, what's fascinating here is the text makes a very hard line between the two. It is a critical distinction to make early on. Procurement is your overarching big picture strategy.
Umbrella.
Yes, the umbrella. It's the comprehensive act of obtaining goods and services. When you're defining a procurement strategy, you are deciding exactly how to acquire those services based on a client's specific requirements.
Time, quality, and cost.
Exactly, the classic triangle. And, crucially, you're evaluating the client's attitude toward risk. Procurement is that entire ecosystem.
Right. And tendering is just one specific execution phase sitting underneath that umbrella.
A single phase.
The text defines tendering strictly as the bidding process used to obtain a price. It's the actual administrative mechanics of how a contractor is appointed. It is not the strategy itself.
No, not at all. You have to define the how and the why before you ever get to the who and the how much.
Because if you approach a project thinking tendering and procurement are the exact same thing, you run the risk of rushing straight out to the market. You just ask for bids without having actually established how you're allocating risk or what your quality standards even are.
And if you do that, without a formalized procurement strategy dictating where the risk lies, your tendering process is going to be chaotic. The prices you get back will be completely unaligned with what this client actually expects.
So assuming that umbrella procurement strategy is firmly in place, you then have to choose how you're going to actually execute the tender. The fun part.
Right. And the RICS guidance outlines the big three primary strategies. Let's start with the default for a lot of people in the industry, the traditional route. Single-stage tendering.
The classic.
In this scenario, you issue identical invitation to tender documents to a number of competing contractors. And crucially, this usually happens at RIBA Stage 4.
Meaning the technical design is completely finished.
Exactly.
And that is the absolute defining characteristic of single stage. Everyone is looking at the exact same highly detailed blueprints, the exact same specifications.
Apples to apples right from the start.
Yep. They are all given a predetermined identical amount of time to submit their final lump sum price. Now, the clear advantage here, and really the reason it remains the standard for so many projects, is that it drives the most aggressive price competition.
Everyone is sharpening their pencils to win the job based on that strictly defined scope.
Exactly. It gets you the best competitive price. But, and this is a big but, because you're dropping a completely finished Stage 4 design on the contractor's desk, you are essentially telling them, build this exactly as drawn. You completely lose all their buildability expertise.
You really do.
The guidance explicitly warns about this. If there is a clash in the steelwork or a massive inefficiency in the mechanical layout that a specialized contractor would have spotted easily at Stage 2.
It's too late.
It's way too late. The client is now going to be paying for that variation later during construction.
And that's the hidden cost of single-stage tendering. There's absolutely no early contractor involvement. No ECI.
They just price what they see.
Right. They aren't helping you figure out better, more efficient ways to build it. Plus, it requires a strictly linear program. You cannot overlap the design phase and the tendering phase.
Which means a longer timeline.
Much longer. You have
Yeah.
to completely finish the design before you can even start the tendering period. And most importantly, the risk remains squarely on the client side. If there's an omission in that stage 4 design, the client bears the financial burden.
So that's a traditional route. Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when you have a project where you absolutely need that contractor's brain early on?
The complex stuff.
Exactly. Imagine you're building a 50 million pound hospital wing on a live functioning medical campus. You can't just throw finished drawings over the wall to a contractor and expect them to understand the logistical nightmare of that site.
No, that would be a disaster.
Yeah.
And that is exactly where you pivot to strategy 2. Two-stage tendering. This fundamentally flips the script on when the contractor gets involved.
They come in way earlier.
Much earlier. It's incredibly popular for those highly constrained projects.
Yeah.
In two-stage, the first stage happens typically at RIBA stage 2 or 3.
Okay.
So concept or developed design.
Before the blueprints are finished?
Right. Because the building isn't fully designed yet, you obviously aren't asking the contractor for a final lump sum price for the whole build. Instead, you select your preferred contractor based on the quality of their proposed management team, their preliminaries, overheads, and profit margins.
You're basically hiring them for their management expertise first.
Precisely. They join the design team, usually under a pre-construction services agreement or PCSA.
So they literally sit at the table with the architects, the structural engineers, the client, while the design is actually being finalized.
And this is where that concept of ECI truly shines. By having the contractor at the table, they can actively mitigate design and construction risks before a single shovel hits the dirt. They bring real-world buildability advice to the forefront.
Advising on material availability, lead times.
Sequencing, logistics, all of it. And because of this, the client can transfer risk much more effectively. The contractor fully understands the project because they actively help design it.
But there is a significant strategic trade-off here.
Always is.
When you reach the second stage, when that design finally hits stage 4, and you need to actually agree on the final contract sum, you are now essentially negotiating with an audience of one.
You are. You're sitting right across the table from that single contractor you brought on board under the PCSA.
So you've completely lost the aggressive multi-party price competitiveness that you had in the single stage route.
Exactly. You trade strict price competition for speed, buildability, and risk mitigation, which is a trade-off that makes perfect sense for a complex hospital wing. But it requires an incredibly skilled quantity surveyor to manage that second stage negotiation.
They really have to earn their fee there.
Oh, absolutely. The QS has to utilize open book accounting, benchmark the subcontractor packages, and rigorously interrogate the costs to ensure the client is still actually getting value for money without the pressure of the open market.
Okay, but what if you don't even have the luxury of time for a two-stage process? What if a critical water main bursts in that same live hospital wing?
Or you need a highly specialized heritage masonry contractor, and there's literally only one firm in the country qualified to do it.
Right. That is where the rules change entirely, and you enter the territory of strategy 3, negotiated tenders.
The negotiated tender is essentially a short list of one from the very beginning. It's the ultimate prioritization of time over cost competition.
So you just pick a contractor.
You select a single contractor, they provide an initial price based on whatever information you have available, and you negotiate directly from there. The advantage is unparalleled speed. There's no long, formalized tendering period required. You can mobilize and get to work incredibly quickly to address an emergency.
But the downside is massive, and the RICS guidance is incredibly strict about the dangers here. You completely compromise the competitive advantage of a formal bidding process.
You do.
In fact, the text points out that many public bodies and government departments outright ban negotiated tenders, except in very, very tightly defined, exceptional circumstances.
And the reason for that ban is the trap of auditability. When you negotiate with a single party from day one, it's incredibly difficult to definitively prove to a board of directors or to the taxpayers funding the project that you actually achieve value for money in the current market.
Because there's no baseline.
Exactly. Without the external pressure of competing bids, you risk paying significantly above market rates. The burden of proof falls entirely on the QS to justify every single penny through benchmarking, which is a really difficult position to defend in an audit.
So those are the core strategies: single stage, two-stage, negotiated. But let's shift from the theory to the actual practical mechanics of setting this up.
Getting into the weeds.
Right. The guidance emphasizes that the quality of your tendering returns is entirely dictated by who is actually on your list. You do not just hand complex project documents to anyone who asks. You need a gatekeeper.
Contractor selection is a critical, non-negotiable filter. Whether you're using open tendering, where anyone can theoretically express interest, or selective tendering, where you draw up a specific shortlist, the RICS standard stresses the absolute necessity of a rigorous PQQ.
A pre-qualification questionnaire.
Exactly.
And the guidance specifically cites the UK government's standard form, PAS 91 from 2013, as the benchmark to follow here. It is not just about asking if they've built a hospital before. PAS 91 checks the absolute vital signs of a contractor before you even let them see the tender documents.
You're checking their specific technical capacity, sure. But more importantly, you're checking their financial standing.
Because if they go under halfway through,
It's a catastrophic risk for a client. You need to ensure they have the cash flow and stability to actually finish the job. You're also checking their health and safety record, their environmental policies, quality assurance protocols.
if a contractor cannot cleanly pass the PQQ stage, they have no business being on your tender list, no matter how cheap they claim they might be.
Absolutely.
Now, I see a massive mistake constantly when it comes to the rules surrounding this, specifically regarding OJU, the official journal of the European Union.
A huge trap.
Clients often think that because a project is largely privately funded or managed by a private developer, they can just ignore public procurement laws. But the RICS guidance is clear on this. If there is even a fraction of public grant money involved, or if the client is a classified public body, you cross that threshold.
You have to ask two fundamental questions at the outset. What is the exact funding source, and what is the total estimated value of the contract?
And if you hit those marks,
If your project hits the specified financial thresholds and involves public money, adherence to the OJU public online portal is legally mandatory. It forces a highly regulated, strictly timed form of open or restricted tendering to ensure absolute fairness and transparency across borders.
and if you ignore OJAU when you are legally required to follow it, you're risking a massive legal challenge from aggrieved contractors. It can literally result in the cancellation of the entire procurement process and massive financial penalties.
It's not something you want to mess with.
Let's talk about the actual timeline of the tender itself. I remember a project once where the client was running behind schedule, and their immediate reaction was to just squeeze the tender period. They said, instead of giving the contractors 4 weeks to price this, let's just give them 2 weeks over the Christmas holiday.
Oh, that's
The guidance explicitly warns against this.
Curtailing a tender period is an incredibly dangerous strategy. It almost always backfires. If you do not give contractors adequate time to properly review the complex documents, send packages out to their specialized supply chain, and accurately calculate their costs,
You force them into a corner.
you really do.
Okay.
And you'll see one of two psychological reactions.
Right. They either submit an artificially low bid because they simply missed critical information in their rush, which inevitably leads to massive disputes, aggressive variations, and claims later on once they actually realize their mistake. Or, more likely, they submit an artificially high bid.
Exactly. When contractors are rushed, they don't just add a standard 5% premium. They look at your risk register, identify all the unknowns they didn't have time to properly quantify, and they price them at the absolute worst-case scenario.
You aren't just paying for speed, you are paying heavily for their anxiety and uncertainty.
It's a panic price, not a market price.
So let's look at the scenario where you did everything right. You established the procurement strategy, chose the right tendering route, ran a rigorous PQQ, gave them ample time. The deadline hits. The bids actually land on your desk. So what does this all mean?
Well, this is arguably where the most rigorous, highly technical quantity surveying work begins. If you just flip to the back page of the tender returns, look at the bottom line numbers, and pick the cheapest one, you are not doing your job.
Not even close.
The professional RICS standard requires you to perform what is known as normalizing or equalizing the returns. Contractors rarely fill out complex pricing documents exactly the way you want them to. You have to ensure a true like-for-like comparison, mathematically comparing apples to apples.
Let's talk about provisional sums as an example of why this is so critical. Say you have a provisional sum for contaminated soil removal. Contractor A prices it at £50,000, but contractor B simply leaves a gap or excludes it entirely.
Happens all the time.
You can't just look at contractor B's bottom line and say they are £50,000 cheaper. You have to level the playing field mathematically before you can even begin to evaluate who actually provided the best value.
And the RICS text provides very specific, rigorous techniques for this exact scenario. To plug that gap for contractor B, you might take the highest bid from the other competing contractors for that specific element. Or you might take an average of all the submitted costs for that item.
Or plug in the allowance you already had in your pre-tender cost plan.
Exactly. There isn't necessarily one single correct method to plug the gap, but the vital key is consistency and documentation. You must apply the exact same mathematical logic across all the bids, and you must document exactly why you chose that method to maintain absolute parity.
And it extends far beyond just missing items. You have to normalize day work rates. You have to scrutinize and normalize overhead and profit percentages.
That's a big one. If one contractor is showing a suspiciously low profit percentage compared to the market average, you have to interrogate how they actually plan to make money on the job.
Are they planning to aggressively hit you with claims and variations later?
You have to adjust the figures to reflect the true anticipated final cost.
And this gets exceptionally complex when you're dealing with design and build contracts, where the allocation of risk is the entire focal point. You have to mathematically normalize the priced risk allowances based on the project's risk register.
The tender documents should include a clear register outlining exactly which risks the contractor owns and which the client owns. If contractor A priced the risk of dealing with adverse weather delays because they assumed ownership of it, but contractor B explicitly excluded it from their bid, you cannot compare their bottom lines.
You must mathematically normalize contractor B's bid to include a financial provision for that risk. Or, with the client's explicit permission, systematically remove it from contractor A's bid to ensure parity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, why go through all this exhausting mathematical rigor? Why not just pick up the phone, call contractor B, ask them to clarify the weather risk, and have them send over a new number?
Because of the foundational principles of parity and transparency.
Exactly. If you allow contractors to casually change their numbers after the official tender deadline has passed, you immediately open the door to claims of corruption, unfair advantage, and bid rigging.
This rigorous mathematical equalization process is what prevents those claims.
It ensures that every single contractor is judged by the exact same unyielding yardstick. Ultimately, this is the only auditable way to guarantee the client is paying the correct, fair market price for the proposed works.
It is entirely about building a bulletproof audit trail. You need to be able to point to the spreadsheet and show an auditor or a client board exactly how the decision was made using pure, unbiased logic and mathematics.
Pure math.
So, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by building the foundation, drawing a hard line between the overarching strategy of procurement and the specific execution phase of tendering. We explored the strategic consequences of the three main routes, the competitive but rigid single stage, the complex risk-mitigating two-stage using early contractor involvement, and the lightning-fast but highly restricted negotiated tender.
We also detailed the absolute necessity of rigorous practical application, using standardized exhaustive PQQs like PAS 91 to filter your contractors, adhering to strict OGU rules for public projects to avoid legal disaster, protecting the integrity of your tender periods to avoid panic pricing.
And finally, the uncompromising mathematics of normalizing and equalizing the tender returns to guarantee a true, auditable, like-for-like comparison. This is your professional toolkit. When you walk into your next project meeting, you now have the RICS-backed authority to demand that clear distinction between procurement and tendering. You have the knowledge to push for rigorous normalization on your next bid analysis, ensuring total accountability in your projects.
It changes the way you operate.
It really does. But before we sign off, there is a fascinating, slightly provocative thought drawn right from the edge of the source material that we want you to consider.
Ooh, this is a good one.
We have just spent all this time talking about the incredibly complex, fundamentally human art of normalizing risk allowances, checking spreadsheets, plugging gaps, adjusting for human error, and differing assumptions. But what happens to all of this when technology makes ambiguity obsolete?
The RICS guidance notes the impending industry-wide arrival of Level 3 BIM, building information modeling. And we're not just talking about basic 3D modeling for clash detection.
No, this is way beyond that.
Level 3 promises fully integrated 4D construction sequencing, meaning time and schedule, are mathematically built into the model. It promises 5D cost information, meaning every single material and component is actively price-linked in real time. And it promises 6D lifecycle management.
It promises a near future where the client, the architect, the quantity surveyor, and every single bidding contractor are all looking at the exact same flawless, interconnected data. The tech suggests this could completely replicate the precision of the manufacturing industry.
Think about the implications for everything we just discussed.
Right. When prediction, ambiguity, and human assumption regarding risk are completely removed from the equation by perfect software, what happens to the art of tendering? Does it simply become an automated race to the bottom for raw material rates and razor-thin profit margins?
If the software mathematically guarantees the risk is zero, do we even need the complex art of two-stage negotiation or risk register normalization?
It represents a profound shift.
It really does. The core value of the quantity surveying professional may have to move entirely away from the traditional quantification of risk and pivot entirely toward managing complex human relationships and optimizing those high-level technological inputs.
It is something for you to seriously ponder as you look at the future of your profession, the software you use every day, and how you deliver value to your clients. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the RICS tendering strategies. Keep questioning the standards, keep elevating your practice, and we'll be right here waiting to unpack the next big topic with you. Stay curious.